Greetings to all. Dear learners, topic for today's discussion is cabinet committees, a useful instrument of taking policy initiatives and affecting coordination in the field of public administration in parliamentary democracy. Cabinet committees relieve cabinet of its extra burden. We shall be discussing this topic under following heads. Introduction, Council of Ministers and Cabinet, evolution of cabinet committees in India, role and importance, some observations, type of committees, recommendations of Administrative Reforms Commission and conclusion. Introduction, a smaller executive body called the Union Cabinet is the supreme decision making body in India. It is a subset of the Union Council of Ministers who hold important portfolios and ministries of the government. The cabinet is the apex organ of the administrative hierarchy in a parliamentary democracy like India. It formulates general policy of the government, secures cooperation and coordination between different departments, and exercises general control over the entire administration. The cabinet as an institution is the result of our following the British cabinet model. Indian constitution mentions only a council of ministers and not the cabinet, which is one of the typical anomalies of the British politics. Students, the cabinet is the apex organ of the administrative hierarchy in a parliamentary democracy like India. It formulates general policies of the government and secures cooperation and coordination among the various departments of the government and exercises general control over the entire administration. It is described as the steering wheel of the ship of the state. It is also described as the keystone of the political arc. It is the pivot around which the whole of the political and administrative machinery revolves. Cabinet is just like a sun around which all the planets or all the different ministries revolve in the parliamentary system of government. Students, cabinet as an institution is the result of our following the British system or the British model. Indian constitution does not mention the word cabinet. In the constitution it is given, there shall be a council of ministers to aid and advise the president in the discharge of his duties. It does not mention the word cabinet. We have adopted this cabinet system from the British model. We have adopted and adapted it to suit our political environment and have developed various conventions regarding this cabinet system. Council of Ministers and Cabinet. The term Council of Ministers and Cabinet are often used interchangeable for each other. However, they differ from each other as Council of Ministers is a bigger body consisting of 60 to 70 members, whereas Cabinet has only 15 to 20 members. Not every minister is the member of the Cabinet. It includes only the main ministers of the government. The Council of Ministers comprises of three types of ministers, with cabinet ministers, state ministers and deputy ministers. The cabinet consists of only the cabinet ministers. Now students, there is a general confusion between the cabinet and the Council of Ministers. Even some important newspapers, eminent journalists also get confused and they use the word Council of Ministers and Cabinet as interchangeable with each other, but these two are different. It is therefore necessary for us to clear this concept before the outset. Now, Cabinet is one of the typical anomalies of the British model which we have adopted and adapted to suit the climate of our political climate of our country. There is a difference between the cabinet and the council of ministers. Cabinet is a part of the council of ministers. First of all, council of ministers is a wider body. It consists of 60 to 70 ministers, whereas in the cabinet there are only 15 to 20 ministers, which comprises of the main ministries of the government of India. Similarly, there are three categories of ministers in the council of ministers. First of all, cabinet ministers, then ministers of the state with independent charge of portfolios allotted to them, then you have deputy ministers to aid and assist the state ministers, whereas in the cabinet only the cabinet ministers are included, that is, it is a part of the council of ministers. Council of ministers does not meet very often, that is, they do not hold their meetings very frequently, whereas cabinet held its meetings very frequently and sometimes very often once in a week. Now, council of ministers is a constitutional body, that is, constitution in the article 74-75 provides for the composition of a council of ministers, whereas cabinet consists of the important ministries from the council of ministers, including the prime minister and other cabinet ministers, though the word cabinet is not mentioned in the original constitution, that is, the original text of the constitution did not contain the word cabinet. It was substituted and added by the 44th amendment, and that too only it mentions there will be a council consisting of the prime minister and other ministers of the cabinet rank appointed under the article 75. So, students, cabinet comprises of the important and main ministries including defense, finance, external affairs, home ministry, etc. Evolution of cabinet committees in India. Committees are basically an organizational device for increasing the output of any agency. It is essentially a method of getting a more specialized and larger volume of work performed by any existing organization. The system of cabinet committee results in considerable reduction in the work of cabinet. N. Gopalaswamy Iyengar had recommended in his report 1949 for setting up a standing committee of cabinet in defined fields to relieve the cabinet of some of the burden of work. In implementation of the above recommendation, the Union government set up in 1950 4 standing committees: Defence, Economic, Parliamentary, Legal Affairs and Administrative Organization, which were organized from time to time based on various observations and recommendations. Now, students, let us trace the evolution of these cabinet committees. As we all know that it is difficult for the cabinet to meet very frequently and go in depth into each specific issue of policy and decision, it takes recourse to the committee system. Committees are basically a group of people who have been chosen from a larger group to decide something or some policy issues. It is basically a sort of a device for increasing the output of any agency. These committees relieve cabinet of its burden and it is left free to devote itself to more important matters. Students, we can trace the origin of the cabinet committees in the report submitted by N. Gopalaswamy Iyengar in 1949, in which he recommended to the government for the establishment of 4 standing committees in the field of defence, economic, parliamentary, legal affairs and administrative organization. And students, in the implementation of the above recommendations given by the N. Gopalaswamy Iyengar, Government of India set up 4 standing committees, that is committees relating to defence, economic affairs, Parliamentary Affairs, Legal Affairs and Administrative Organization. This last committee was established as an ad hoc committee, and a new fifth committee was soon also established and added in the form of the Appointment Committee. Now, these committees have been organized and established and reorganized time to time based on the various recommendations and observations provided by the reports, study teams and Administrative Reforms Commission. Students, since independence and later on also, we have seen a spurt in the use of the cabinet committees from time to time and subcommittees also by various governments in India, especially the Janata government in 1977, which made the extensive use of the cabinet committees. Role and importance. Cabinet committees wields real power of decision on important general policy matters. The committee system safeguards the principle of collective responsibility. Cabinet committees greatly increase the effectiveness of political control over public services. They also acts as collective check on individual ministers and on the Prime Minister too. Committees facilitate effective coordination. Now, students, these cabinet committees are very important as they take various decisions regarding the administration and policy matters. First of all, we see that these cabinet committees are the highest decision making authority in the country. Then these cabinet committees acts as the safeguard for the principle of the collective responsibility, which is the essential feature of the parliamentary system or the cabinet system. Ministers who are not members of cabinet are members of one or the other various cabinet committees. Thus, all the ministers continue to be partly responsible for the actions of the government. Then, public servants cabinet committees increases the effectiveness of political control over public services. That is, public servants are called upon by these cabinet committees to justify the proposals or policy issues and comments on the various problems under the review by the government. So, there establishes a close liaison between the public servants and the ministers and politicians. Next, cabinet committees acts as a check on the individual ministers and on the Prime Minister as well. Lastly, we see that cabinet committees facilitate effective coordination between the political system and the various ministers. That is, in the view of the growth and complexities of the business of the government, as increase in the size of the cabinet, it is essential that there should be a proper division of labor between the various ministers and ministries, and committees are necessary to perform the functions devolved on them by the cabinet. They secure effective coordination among the various departments and ministries of the government. Following points can be noted with regard to cabinet committees in India. They are extra constitutional in emergence. They are of two types, standing and ad hoc. They are set up by the Prime Minister according to the exigencies of time and situation. Their membership varies from 3 to 8. They not only include the ministers in charge of subjects covered by them, but also include other senior ministers. They are mostly headed by the Prime Minister. They not only sort out issues and formulate proposals, but also take various decisions. They are a sort of device to reduce the enormous workload of the cabinet. Now, students, let us discuss certain features of these cabinet committees. First of all, we see that these cabinet committees are extra constitutional bodies, that is, constitution does not mention about these committees. However, the rules of business provides for the establishment of committees. Then the cabinet committees are of two types. We have standing committees, that is permanent committees, and we have ad hoc committees, they are of temporary nature. Standing committees are constituted from time to time and they remain in existence, whereas the ad hoc committees are constituted based on the exigencies of the situation and they are disbanded as soon as their task is over. Next, cabinet committees are set up by the Prime Minister according to the need and situation of the country. Their number, their names, nomenclature, their composition changes and varies from time to time and under the various governments in the country. Then their membership also varies from 3 to 8. Usually it includes only the cabinet ministers, but sometimes non-cabinet ministers are also added to the committees. Then mostly the committees are headed by the Prime Minister, but sometimes other ministers also like Home Minister, Finance Minister acts as the chairman, but in case if the Prime Minister is the member of any of the cabinet committees, he invariably presides over that particular committee. Then these cabinet committees, they sort out issues, formulate proposals, policies for the consideration of the cabinet. They also sometimes take decisions. However, cabinet can review their decisions as and when required. Then these cabinet committees we see acts as an organizational device. They reduce the enormous burden and workload of the cabinet. They facilitate in-depth examination of policy issues and effective coordination between the various departments of the government. Types of committees. Cabinet committees may be ad hoc or standing. The purpose of former is merely to settle some specific problems submitted to them. They are automatically dissolved as soon as the task is fulfilled. The standing committees, which are of great importance, have wider competence and their duration is indeterminate. They may be terminated by the fresh decisions of the cabinet or the Prime Minister. 3 to 4 standing cabinet committees have always existed under all the governments in power at the centre, though variations in their nomenclature and membership with each major change in government or emergence of any new responsibility of the government is not unusual. These committees are important and need discussions. Now students, cabinet committees are of two types. We have standing cabinet committees and we have ad hoc cabinet committees. The standing cabinet committees are of permanent nature, while the latter are of temporary nature. Ad hoc committees are constituted from time to time to deal with the specific problems, and as soon as their task is over, they are disbanded. For example, emergency committee was constituted by the Government of India in the wake of the Chinese invasion in 1962. There are certain 3 to 4 permanent standing committees being constituted by each and every government in the country. They are related to the matters of defence, economy, home affairs, parliamentary affairs, and they are permanent in nature and continue to exist in various governments, though their name, composition, their number may vary from time to time. Now students, we will be discussing these standing cabinet committees one by one. Political Affairs Committee. It is the most powerful of all the cabinet committees. It deals with policy matters relating to domestic and foreign policy. It is headed by the Prime Minister. It comprises of Ministers of Home, Defence, External Affairs and Finance. Now students, first and foremost important cabinet committee, standing cabinet committee, is Political Affairs Committee. It is constituted under every government. since the cabinet committees came into existence. And it is one of the most important and powerful cabinet committees. It is chaired by Prime Minister, and it comprises of the main ministries of Home, Defence, External Affairs and Finance. It deals with the policy matters relating to the domestic and foreign policy of the country. It also takes into consideration the center-state relations, political issues which have wider perspective in the government. Economic Affairs Committee. It is headed by the Prime Minister. It includes Ministers of Finance, Agriculture, Rural Development, Industries, etc. as its members. It provides direction and effects coordination in the government interventions in economic affair. Next students, we have Economic Affairs Committee. It is also headed by the Prime Minister. Economic Affairs Committee includes the Ministers of Finance, Ministers of Agriculture, Ministers of Rural Development, Ministers of Industries as its members. Now, this Economic Affairs Committee directs and coordinates governmental activities in economic spheres in the country. It reviews the various economic trends in the country. It reviews the progress of activities related to the rural development, including the agriculture and various small and marginal farmers. It also deals with the licensing of industrial cases involving the proposals for the joint establishment or joint undertakings. It also considers issues relating to the disinvestment by the government. Appointment Committee. It is chaired by Prime Minister. It consists of Ministers of Home Affairs, Public Grievances, Personnel and Pensions. Ministers concerned with ministry for which appointments are being considered are also its members. It finalizes higher level appointment to be made in the Central Secretariat, public sector undertakings, banks, etc. Now, next students, we have Appointment Committee. It is also another important committee. It is presided over by the Prime Minister of India, and the main task of this appointment committee is to deal with all the higher level appointments in the country. Its members includes the Ministers of Home, Ministers of Personnel and Pension, Ministers of Public Grievances. It decides all the cases of disagreement relating to the appointment between the department or ministry concerned and the Union Public Service Commission. Its task is to consider and decide representations, appeals and memorials in the central government. It finalizes all the higher level appointments to be made by the Government of India in Central Secretariat, in various public sector undertakings, in various nationalized banks, etc. Committee on Parliamentary Affairs. It is headed by Home Minister. It consists of Minister of Law, Information and Broadcasting, Labour and Parliamentary Affairs. It watches the progress of government business in Parliament and gives such direction as may be necessary from time to time in order to secure smooth and efficient conduct of such business. Next students, we have Committee on Parliamentary Affairs. This committee is chaired by the Home Minister. That is, Home Minister is the president of this committee. He presides over the meetings of Committee on Parliamentary Affairs. Now, it includes the Ministers of Law, Ministers of Information Broadcasting, Labour and Parliamentary Affairs are its members. The main function of the Parliamentary Committee is to watch the progress of government business in Parliament and to give direction necessary for smooth and efficient conduct of the business of the government. It scrutinizes and conduct attitude of the government on non-official bills and resolutions to be presented to the Parliament. So, students, these are the various important standing cabinet committees which existed under various governments in the country. Now, in the NDA government, we have 8 cabinet committees. First of all, there is appointment committee, then accommodation committee, economic affairs committee, parliamentary affairs committee, political affairs committee, we have security committee, then 2 new cabinet committees being added by this government are investment and growth committee to tackle or to scrutinize the investment and growth in the country. Then you have employment and skill development committee being appointed under the NDA government to deal with the various schemes of employment and skill development in the country. So, these are the various cabinet committees which are currently, these 8 cabinet committees are in existence. Recommendations of Administrative Reforms Commission. There should be set up 11 standing committees, 1 each for defence, foreign affairs, economic affairs, parliamentary affairs, public relations, food and rural development, transport, tourism and communications, social services, commerce, industry and science, internal affairs, administration and appointments. Membership of each committee should not normally exceed 6 and should include all ministers in charge of subjects covered by the committee. Every standing committee should be supported by a committee of secretaries. Ad hoc committees should be retained, which should be confined to mere investigation and not decision making. Now, students, the Administrative Reforms Commission set up by the Government of India in its report submitted gave the various recommendations regarding the constitution and the nature of the cabinet committees. First of all, it provided that there should be 11 standing committees which should continue to exist relating to the matters of very important nature, that is defence, foreign affairs, economic affairs, parliamentary affairs, public relations, food, rural development, transportation, tourism, communication, social services, industry, science, commerce, internal affairs, etc. Then the Reforms Commission provided that the membership of these committees should not go beyond 6 and it should include all the ministers in charge of the subjects covered by the committee. Then Reforms Commission suggested that these cabinet committees should be supported by the secretaries of the committee to aid and assist in their discharge of functions. Then Reforms Commission also suggested to retain the ad hoc committees, that is, it said that they can be retained though they cannot be taken into decision making, but can be taken as a mere investigative committees. Conclusion. From the above discussion, it is clear that the cabinet is indeed a formidable institution. It is the prime mover of a political action and the core of Indian political system. Though the cabinet is the highest policy making body in the government, some of the cabinet committees have come to exercise real authority and the cabinet nearly endorses the decisions already taken there. A subject requiring cabinet decision may either come directly to the appropriate committee or may be referred to it by the cabinet for in-depth scrutiny before the latter takes a decision. Now, students, from the ongoing discussions of the cabinet committees, we conclude that the cabinet committees are indeed very important in the parliamentary system of democracy in India. We see that they are extra constitutional devices to aid and assist the working of the government. They facilitate smooth functioning of the government and coordinates between the various departments and ministries in the government. They are not constituted in the rigid manner, that is, we see that there is a flexibility in their composition, and which is very important and essential virtue of these cabinet committees from time to time. So, the cabinet committees aid and assist the working of the government, and they are very important device in the smooth functioning of the parliamentary democracy. With this, we come to the end of today's lecture. We have discussed about the cabinet committees. First of all, we have discussed what is cabinet, how is it different from council of ministers, then what is the need, why the cabinet committees are constituted, what are their essential features, what are their roles, importance, and the various cabinet committees which have existed under the different governments in the country, and the main important standing committees. I hope this lecture will prove beneficial to all the students. Thank you.